when we look at what happened with George Floyd, that was a very, very, shocking incident, particularly for people, for us in the UK. Do you think that that is just a one-off, or unfortunately, do you get bad apples in the American police force, and that this happens every once in a while?
Well, I think in every organization, you're going to have bad apples. Maybe 1% of all police officers are like that. The most horrific scandal in LA history is called the Rampart scandal. If you remember the movie that Denzel Washington starred in called Training Day, it was all about and inspired by the so-called Rampart scandal, which was a big, big scandal. It involved a grand total of 70 police officers out of a police force of close to 10,000. So it was less than 1%. Now, anything north of zero is too many, and one officer can do a great deal of damage and damage the reputation of the other 99%. And we have to deal with it. But to act as if it's some sort of broad-based performance on the part of the police is extremely unfair. Even in the George Floyd case, in the prosecution's opening statement, the prosecutor said, a black man, by the way, said that the Minneapolis Police Department is not on trial. This particular individual officer is on trial for allegedly murdering this particular individual named George Floyd. Nothing more, nothing less. It's the media that takes this and acts as if it's some sort of referendum on America in general and on the police in particular, when it is nothing of the sort. These things should be dealt with on a case-by-case basis. I gave a speech once before a bunch of football students at Ohio State University. I was invited by the then coach. And he had a Black Lives Matter proponent in the month before that stirred them all up, made them all angry. And he asked me if I would come in and give my point of view. And I did. And there must have been about 100 football players. And I said, you can probably name the blacks who have been killed by the police. And I rattled off some of the names. And I said, are you aware there are more unarmed whites every year killed by the police than unarmed blacks? And I said, name one. And I dropped my mic and I crossed my hands like this. And the room was silent for 20 seconds because nobody could think of anybody. I can think of several unarmed whites who've been killed over the years because this is what I do, but they didn't know of a single one of them. I got a phone call the other day from a woman named Gloria from Dallas, Texas. Larry, she's angry at me. You're always talking about how the police killed unarmed whites. I can't think of a time when the police stood on an unarmed white person and put him in the street like that and treated him the way they did George Floyd. And I said, Gloria, you're in Dallas. 2016, Google a man named Tony Timpa, T-I-M like Mary, P like Paul, A. He was a schizophrenic man. 911 was called. He was put on the ground, held on the ground. The officers put their feet on his shoulder. He was held longer than was George Floyd. It was horrific. The man happened to be white. The officers were mostly white. They were investigated, but nothing happened. My point is, this was in her own city, and she was unaware of it because the national media did not make a big deal out of it. A few years ago, there was a man named Kelly Thomas, Thomasas. His father was even a cop, for crying out loud. White guy, also mentally ill. Not only did the police beat him up, one officer put gloves on and said, I'm going to F you up. There was a big investigation. The officers were not charged. And the whole thing went away. Again, the national media not interested. Kelly Thomas was white. Not long ago in California, I think it was in December, there was a Navy vet, for crying out loud, named Quinto, Quinto. According to his family, the video and sound video, the police, Antioch Police Department, held his neck for 5 minutes. And the man ultimately died after taken to the hospital. Again, a big deal locally, but not a big deal nationally. And the man happened to be a Filipino American, not black. Ergo, the national media did not give a damn. Also, a few months ago, police pursuing somebody on foot. The suspect runs into a backyard. Police sees a man who matches the suspect, shoots and kills the suspect. Turns out it wasn't the suspect. He was the resident of the house who heard a commotion, came outside to find out what was going on, and the police shot and killed him. Now, the man who was shot and killed was white. The cop was white. The suspect who was pursued, ultimately captured, was white. Ergo, national media did not give a damn. Had that homeowner been a black man, I'm sure we would know his name. LeBron James would have tweeted about it. This is my point. The police are killing more whites every year than blacks, more unarmed whites every year than blacks, but it does not fit the narrative. It is true that the rate at which the police kill blacks is 2.5 times higher than the rate at which they kill whites. And that's what people often refer to. But as I said earlier, a young black man is 8 to 10 times more likely to be a victim of a homicide than a young white man. So if anything, the 2.5 time rate is lower than one would have predicted based upon the number of crimes that are being committed. So if anything, the police are showing a great deal of hesitance and reluctance in pulling the trigger against a black suspect than a white suspect.
Larry, what about non-fatal incidents? Because we had Coleman Hughes on the show, who I'm sure you know, a very interesting young guy. And he was talking about the evidence that there is some evidence to suggest that police are more likely to rough up a black suspect versus a white suspect. Isn't that an area of concern?
No, not an area of concern. The Harvard, a black Harvard professor named Roland Fryer, Fryer, had never done any work on police shootings of blacks. But because of the high profile stuff, he just knew that the police were using disproportionate deadly force against black people and thought he would do a survey to prove this. And he said the results were the most surprising of his professional career. Again, not only were the police not killing blacks because they were black, the police were more hesitant, more reluctant to pull the trigger on a black suspect than a white suspect. He did find, however, that the police were 18 to 20 times more likely to use non-deadly force on a black suspect than a white suspect. And I have two reactions to that. The first is 18% is not a whole lot more, but more importantly, isn't that because they don't want to get to the point where they're using deadly force? So therefore, they're using non-deadly force more frequently on a black suspect, not to get to the point where they're at DEFCON 1. That's probably what's going on. When you talk to cops, that's what they tell you. We do not want to use deadly force on a black person. That's the last thing we want to do. As a result, very likely they're using non-deadly force, probably more urgently on a black suspect than on a white suspect. If that's what's going on, I don't find that a bad thing.